Hey, do you like that dreamy film look? Well, if so, stick around. I'll show you how to create it with Dehancer. Dehancer at its core is a plugin that allows you to digitally de-enhance your photos and videos. It kind of takes that edge. It creates a more memorable appearance and aesthetic by making it look a little imperfect, blooming light, using halation, adding some grain, just adding those subtle touches that kind of triggers that memory in your brain to kind of make it a memorable image. So I've been actually using the Dehancer iPhone app for quite a bit of time now, and I think it's a lot of fun to kind of add that flair to my reels and shorts and photos. When the homies at Dehancer asked me to kind of review and give my thoughts on their plugin for Premiere Pro, I definitely jumped up at that opportunity. I love using this tool and I really wanted to see how it would work. Definitely super stoked to show you those results, and let's just dive into it. Okay, so we're in Premiere Pro with my sample clip on my timeline. One very happy dog chilling in the sun. But before we get started, I'm just going to make a few quick adjustments to my white and black tones on my clip in Lumetri. And then I'm going to look for the Dehancer plugin in my effects rack. And it's important to note that you want to change your video resolution to the lowest setting that you can do for a better playback. And we'll go to the effects control panel, scroll down to Dehancer, and we're going to go through input. So if you shot in log, you can choose the camera that you shot in log with for better grading. It's a really great option for more accurate grading. But never fear, if you didn't shoot in log like I did, you can go back to Rec 709. It's just as fine. We'll go down to film, and here you can enable the film profiles, which is probably my favorite part of Dehancer, just being able to explore the various film profiles. Let's try out Fujicolor Pro 400H, one of my favorites. We'll do some EV adjustments with the push and pull. Close that. I'm not going to show you all of these settings, but I'm going to show you the settings that I've used the most and that I find the most helpful. So let's scroll down to film grain, and I like to bump up the highlights, lower the midtones and shadows, make the amount of film grain less, change the amount, and you can mess around with the color toning of your clip if you'd like. The print setting is pretty cool. We'll get to that in a bit. Now we're going to go down to Halation, one of my favorites, and you're going to enable it, and we're going to add a little bit more diffusion and smoothness, and touch up a few other settings, amplify the effect a bit more. Now as you're doing this, you won't be able to see the effect as well as you'd like to, so this is what mask mode is used for. I just recently learned this myself, so it's super helpful in determining how much halation and bloom that you want on your clip. Halation is the extra kind of reddish or warm tint to the edges of your subject, or like on tree branches or something like that. You can kind of see it in old photographs and videos. It's kind of like that red stroke. Let's go down to bloom, and unlike halation, when you enable it, you can immediately see it. Wow, it's just like pow. The lights in the trees have definitely been diffused. If you mess around with save lights, you can really see how dramatic it can be. So I'm just going to play around with these settings to get it where I like, and I think I like that. We'll enable vignetting real quick to just give it a little contrast. And we'll preview it real quick. And you can see the before and after so far, toggling the eye icon. Now I'm going to go back to Lumetri and give it a little bit more dimension using the S-curve to give it a bit more contrast. This is something that I like to do with both Dehancer and Lumetri kind of combined. I feel like it gives me a greater, more powerful, comprehensive grade. And I'm going to go back, and we'll go back to the color head setting. I kind of want to add a little bit of more red tones to the clip to kind of evoke that feeling of nostalgia and kind of that film feeling. Drop a little bit of red in the highlights. Close that. So So we're going to go to the print film setting and we're going to choose the Fujifilm 3513 option. It looks pretty stark, pretty contrasty. So what this setting does is that it emulates the analog print film process, which is pretty neat. You can change the exposure a little bit. You can mess around with the target wide options. You can give it a bit more tonal contrast. I'm going to check out the Endura. Let's see what that looks like. A little bit more faded. See how that looks. Let's render this out and boop, we're done. It's important to note that you want to kind of render your clip out every once in a while just to make sure you like the way it looks. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to see what it's going to actually look like, especially when it comes to the grain. So you can see the grain and the halation along the edges and the grain and the highlights. And what I like to do is, once you're happy with the grade, you can just copy and paste the Dehancer setting to some other clips and just immediately see what it would look like on your timeline. And there you have it. I'll export this out and show you the before and after of this grade. Would you look at that? One beautiful, happy dog in film aesthetic. I would say for me, having numerous pro level sims or simulations at your fingertips is pretty handy. You have the iconic, I think it's the Fuji 400H, which is great for skin tones. Kodak Ektar 25 I've been using quite a bit, and I think that's great for that kind of very high contrast yellow, orange, blue look, if that even makes any sense. But I really like using it with oranges and blues. I'm definitely learning a lot more about the different types of film that's out there and kind of researching upon that and kind of getting a better idea of how to kind of incorporate that in my content creation. Another definite pro is the greater functionality and features of adding grain to your clip. Whether that's to the shadows, the midtones, or the highlights, I think that's a game changer because you can kind of definitely accentuate where you want the viewer to kind of focus their eyes on using that grain in a very subtle way. I'll also say that the bloom and halation feature is fantastic. You can definitely mirror the effect of, like, let's say a diffusion filter. Another cool thing that Dehancer has is that it has print film profiles. So typically in an analog movie or video production, you would print the film as the last stage of the process once you've kind of arranged everything in a linear fashion. So we can kind of replicate that with Dehancer. Dehancer has a few print film profiles, and you can kind of emulate the analog movie process by kind of using this as the last step of your color grading process. So when you kind of toggle this on, you'll usually see greater contrast, maybe some details elevated, and you can kind of use this as a final mastering and final finishing touches on your video. It's pretty cool to kind of emulate that analog film process. I would say the biggest con for me is that Dehancer requires a lot of processing power and a pretty good machine to run effectively. This right here is a 2020 M1 Max MacBook Pro, and it destroys, 4K, 8K footage with ease. I don't have to use proxies. It's a great computer in terms of editing, and I've found that in the last video with Dehancer applied to pretty much, I would say, every clip, and I would say I had film grain, bloom, halation, some vignetting, a few other settings on some of them, plus the film profiles. And then I added the print film post-processing on it as well. I've found that export and render time really went up dramatically, and it was definitely frustrating having a slower workflow. So I would say that's the biggest con. Another con with the Premiere plugin that I can think of is, at least with the iOS app, I did find it pretty enjoyable, that it was really easy to kind of scrub through the different film profiles. You could just, upload your video, and then you can kind of just slide as if you're picking a different filter, and you can visually see just right then and there what it would look like. And you can do that with Lumetri. You can kind of click the right or left arrow and scrub through the different LUT options, where as in Dehancer, it's just a drop-down window and there's no preview function until you have to physically select that film profile. The last con that I probably have, and I'm trying to decide if it's a con or not, is that I'm Going over the price in my head for the desktop plugin for Premiere Pro, DaVinci, and I believe Final Cut. And the price is $399. And that seems a little steep to me when you consider how much you're getting, and if you're really into that style and kind of into having greater control and customization and flexibility to kind of create that cinematic film aesthetic, then I do think it's worth it. But you really have to want that, and you really have to know what you're getting. But I would recommend using their free trial, testing it out, and seeing if you like the workflow, if you like the process, and if you like your results, most importantly. So definitely keep that in mind. And lastly, here are a few tips for faster performance using Dehancer. Number 1, I would close out Chrome or any web browser. You don't need it, it's hogging up all your memory. Number 2, use the global effects mute when you're trying to scrub through your timeline if you need to go back and make changes to your story. It'll be easier on Premiere and it'll be a faster process. Number 3, use Dehancer last in your post-production process. Craft your story, get your clips in order, do everything before Dehancer, and then use it as the very last effect. And if you're unsure about that, I would then recommend maybe using like 3 or 4 clips to kind of get a basic grade and know what you're doing ahead of time, and then wait to do the entire grade later at the very end. And that about wraps it up. For me personally, I do think I will use Dehancer in the future for a good chunk of my projects. I really like the way it makes my footage look. I am a sucker for that kind of cinematic film, dreamy ambiance look, and I really think it elevates my footage. So if you're that type of person, then I strongly recommend heading over to Dehancer.com, checking out the free trial, and just seeing what they offer. Also, use code SIZEESCAPES if you want 10% off, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.